Remains, along with 8 other poems by Simon Armitage, first aired in a Channel 4 documentary entitled The Not Dead in the winter of 2007, and later appeared in a collection of the same name in 2008. Inspired by the testimonies of ex-soldiers, the poems focus on flashbacks that they have struggled to forget. Although they may have physically survived the conflict, they now suffer from PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. In one major study of 60,000 Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, 13.5% of both deployed and non-deployed veterans screened positive for PTSD, although other studies have shown higher prevalence rates of 20 to 30%. The title of the collection, The Not Dead, refers not only to the ex-servicemen who have returned from war zones such as Iraq, Afghanistan, the Falkland Islands and Malaya, but also to the ghosts of the people they have killed, who repeatedly return to life, only to die again in their memories. If someone is not dead, logically they are alive, but this has positive connotations of vitality and exuberance. There is a suggestion that their existence is a type of limbo, where they may be not dead, but they are also not fully alive either. Remains is based upon the testimony of Guardsman Tromans, a young soldier who was deployed to Basra in Iraq in 2003. In the documentary, he explains that the looter was the first person that he had ever killed, and that not a day goes by that I don't go through that whole situation in my head. Simon Armitage said of producing this collection that for those he talked to, time is no great healer, and that, never having been to the front line, turning the words, phrases and experiences of these soldiers into verse has been the closest I've ever come to writing real war poetry, and as close as I ever want to get. The poem comprises 8 stanzas, of which the first 7 have 4 lines and the final one 2. It is written in free verse and has no rhyme scheme or fixed metrical structure. The poem is written in the form of a monologue, which is a long speech by a single speaker. Typical of Armitage's style, there is an abundance of colloquialisms and idioms, such as "legsit," "letting fly," "end of story," "6 feet under," and "near to the knuckle." These everyday speech patterns not only bring the monologue to life, but also communicate the idea that the speaker is an everyday, ordinary person who has had to carry out extreme acts of violence in extraordinary circumstances. The first sentence is written in the past tense, but the rest of the poem reverts to the present tense. Using the present tense is not only a colloquial way of recounting an incident which has occurred, but it is also very successful at communicating the immediacy with which the ex-soldier still experiences this incident. There is an interesting use of the personal pronouns we and us in the first part of the poem, and I and my in the second part of the poem, as we find out that even though the act of killing the looter was perpetrated by a group, and the responsibility for his death should be borne by the group as a whole, the aftermath and the trauma of the death is very much an individual phenomenon which the speaker must suffer alone. The dead man is referred to throughout only as the looter or he. There is a sense in which the speaker needs to reaffirm this label of criminality, to distance himself and to remind himself that he acted in good faith. If he were to think of him in any other context, e.g. as somebody's father or son, the pain would be even more unbearable than it is now. Armitage weaves the techniques of enjambment and caesura throughout the poem to create the natural ebb and flow of speech. It not only helps to drive the narrative relentlessly forward in places, but also creates dramatic pauses. There is subtle use of sound patterning techniques, such as alliteration, consonants and assonance, which contribute to the poem's rhythm and helps to enhance meaning. Armitage starts sentences with conjunctions such as and but, and discourse markers such as well and so, to evoke the sense of this being spoken rather than written language. The title does not immediately give a context for what we are about to read. There's no mention of the army, nor of a geographical location, so we are obliged to infer details from the language used in the poem itself. Understanding of the title is achieved only after the whole poem has been read and fully understood. The word remains could refer to human remains, i.e. the corpse of the looter whom the soldier recalls killing. It could also refer to the extreme violence of the killing itself, as the sheer force of the bullets appear to blow away a large part of the man's midsection. It could also refer to the fact that the man leaves remains of his death behind, not only in the blood shadow on the street, but also in the form of the trauma, grief, guilt and PTSD that the veteran is condemned to experience on a daily basis. The poem begins with the phrase, "on another occasion," which gives the sense not only that we have come in on the middle of a conversation, but also that this is just one of a number of anecdotes which the speaker has been recounting. We got sent out to tackle looters raiding a bank. The personal pronoun we here implies that there are a group of them, and the verb got sent out makes it clear that whoever they are tackling these looters who are raiding a bank under orders. By identifying their target as looters raiding a bank, we know that these individuals are committing a criminal act and, by implication, that the speaker is on the side of law and order. The next sentence, "and one of them legs it up the road," tells us that the looters are making their escape, presumably towards the soldiers. Note the use of the colloquial verb legs it, which seems discordant with the gravity of the incident, and is perhaps a defence mechanism on the part of the speaker. The stanza ends with the rhythmic phrase, "probably armed, possibly not," a slight variation of which will recur later in the poem. The rhythm, which consists of two trochee I-am pairs, goes dum-dee-dee-dum, dum-dee-dee-dum, and has the feel of a refrain, perhaps evoking the repetitive thought which will continue to haunt him. The phrase also highlights the way in which these men have to make life or death decisions in a split second based on often incomplete information. The difference in degree of probably and possibly indicates that they have weighed up that there is more chance of the man being armed than not, that their lives are therefore in danger, and that he is a legitimate target. The second stanza starts with the discourse marker well and continues, "myself and somebody else are all of the same mind." The use of polysyndeton here and the vagueness of the repeated somebody else not only underlines that he is not alone in his decision-making, but also that he is deliberately protecting their identities, as there is no way that he would not remember the names of the fellow soldiers with whom he first took someone's life. Their individual identities are not important, however, as they are all of the same mind. Their reading of the situation is unanimous. They act, therefore, as one. So all three of us open fire. The phrase, "three of a kind all letting fly," with the repetition of 3 in the next line, not only emphasises once more that the men are acting in concert, but also alludes to the game of poker and could be implying that the soldier's actions are a gamble. The verb letting fly is a colloquial term meaning to open fire, but also has connotations of a lack of restraint. The soldiers have now gone past the point of no return, and this is echoed in the way that Armitage chooses to enjam the line across the stanza break as the narrative moves relentlessly forward. And I swear I see every round as it rips through his life. The speaker appears to remember this as though it is happening in slow motion. The metaphor rips through his life is graphic. The use of hyperbole in the statement, "I see broad daylight on the other side," communicates the sheer horror of the sight in front of him. Note the use of assonant long I sounds over these lines, which give the poem rhythm and continuity, enhancing the way in which, once set in motion, the soldier's actions cannot be undone. The next line begins with another discourse marker. So, we've hit this looter a dozen times. The repetition of the word looter at this point is crucial as it reminds not only his listener, but also himself, after this description of a very violent death, that his actions were justifiable. The description of the man there on the ground, sort of inside out, pain itself, the image of agony, is horrific as we realise that he is, for the moment, still alive and in excruciating pain. The description, sort of inside out, is gruesome in its crudity and indicates that the bullets have blown away the part of his body holding his insides in, so that they are spilling onto the ground. The man has become the embodiment of pain itself. He is the image of agony. He refers to his fellow soldier as one of my mates, highlighting once more the way in which the soldiers are all in this together. The way in which his mate goes by and tosses the looter's guts back into his body is brutal. The verb tosses, suggesting a casual action. The man is treated with as much care as a sack of potatoes. He is then carted off in the back of a lorry, presumably to be buried somewhere. The verb carted off suggests his abrupt and unceremonious removal, as though he is no longer a person. This stanza is end-stopped, as if to signal the end of the story, but note the slant rhyme of body and lorry is jarring and discordant, which leaves the reader feeling uneasy. The next stanza, however, begins "end of story, except not really," indicating that what should have been the end is, in fact, just the beginning. This is further enhanced by the continuation of the slant rhyme with story and really. His blood shadow stays on the street, and out on patrol I walk right over it week after week. The blood shadow perhaps refers to the literal staining of the ground with the blood of the fatally injured man that the soldier has to walk over. It also suggests a metaphorical shadow, or a feeling of gloom and uneasiness caused by the memory of taking a man's life that the soldier is unable to escape. The persistence of this is conveyed by the repetition of week in week after week, and the assonance of the E sound echoed from the word street. The soldier is then home on leave. The full stop suggests that he will be able to finally draw a line under it when he physically leaves the area. The conjunction but, however, which starts the next sentence indicates that this will not be the case. But I blink and he bursts again through the doors of the bank. Even when he involuntarily closes his eyes for a fraction of a second, he is confronted with the scene and has to relive it as though it is happening here and now. Note not only the guttural consonants of the k sounds which carries over from Iraq to back home, but also the alliteration of the plosive b sounds in but, blink, bursts and bank, which enhances the speed, shock and violence of the way in which the man exits the bank, and perhaps foreshadows the inevitable sounds of the bullets to follow. Not only do the images from this event haunt him while he is awake during the day, but they also plague him at night. Sleep, and he's probably armed, and possibly not. Dream, and he's torn apart by a dozen rounds. When he falls asleep, he is tormented by the judgment call he made that day. In the heat of the moment, the fact that the looter was probably armed meant that he and his fellow soldiers decided to shoot him as a means of self-defence. As the images replay over and over, there is a nagging doubt that he was possibly not armed after all. The addition of the conjunction "and" here seems to give more weight to this possibility, and probably adds to the speaker's sense of guilt. What if he shot an unarmed man? When he dreams, he has to relive the gruesome image of the man being torn apart in front of his eyes. Note the way Armitage uses caesura here, separating the words sleep and dream from the rest of the line, enhancing the fact that words which usually have connotations of peace and relaxation have been hijacked by the violence and persistence of these nightmares. The soldier is self-medicating with alcohol and narcotics, but the drink and the drugs won't flush him out. The monotony of the anapaestic meter of "and the drink and the drugs, did-dum, enhanced by the alliteration, seems to highlight the futility of these attempts to end his nightmares. The way in which he uses the verb "flush him out," as though he is physically here in his head, an enemy to be forced out of hiding, or a toxin to be purged from his body, gives the flashbacks of this man's substance and helps to convey how this experience is very real for the soldier. The man is dug in behind enemy lines. He's stubborn and is not going anywhere. This image, using military language, suggests that the soldier is left fighting another war, this time with post-traumatic stress disorder. The looter, rather than being left for dead in some distant, sun-stunned, sand-smothered land or 6 feet under in desert sand, which is what happened to his physical remains, comes to life only to be shot dead again and again in flashbacks that won't stop. Note the repetition of the word sand, the hissing sibilant alliteration, the assonance of the short sounds, and the consonants of the hard d sounds in these lines, the dissonance of which helps to communicate the veteran's despair. The final two-line stanza is full of anguish, as the looter is not distant, but is instead near to the knuckle here and now. Near the knuckle is an idiom, meaning that something is verging on the indecent or the offensive, and communicates the torment that the veteran feels. The poem ends on a note of hopelessness, with the line, "His bloody life in my bloody hands." The frustration of the soldier is felt through his repeated use of the expletive bloody. The words literal and metaphorical meanings are also referenced here. The looter's life was literally bloody, or covered with blood, while the veteran feels that his hands are metaphorically bloody, in the same way that Lady Macbeth had blood on her hands, or guilt that she couldn't wash away. The structure of the final stanza is interesting. Why does it only have 2 lines when all the others have 4? It is unlikely that Armitage merely ran out of things to say. It's possible that the poem seems unfinished because the veteran's story is not finished. There is no end to the suffering that this incident will cause him. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on English language topics and exam techniques and English literature texts.